Hi, friends. Why did I decide to feature Pat McGrath's first 3 motherships in one video? Well, I came across this comment that was posted under my iconic palettes video, and it made an impact on me. It did, and I had included Pat McGrath's Star Wars collab, the first one, the Rise of Skywalker Decadence palette, on that list, and Brian Miller 5800 made a significant point, and it reads, I think Pat's first wave of motherships are her most iconic eyeshadow palette release. I don't see popular as the same as iconic, and the waves the release caused in the community over the price and the luxury, color stories and formulas, all discourse and conversation they cause actually changed the game for eyeshadow palette releases. Brian, you are so right. It continues, I mean, every brand chased the special shade hype. Every brand has tried to come out with their version of special shades because of those palettes. There are brands who never in a million years would have dreamed they would charge what they charge now for an eyeshadow palette before that release. So many people drank the Luxe Beauty Kool-Aid specifically because of those palettes. To me, that is iconic. I see the Star Wars palettes and other motherships as just being popular and coveted. This is why I had to dedicate an entire video to Mother's first 3 mothership palettes, and I'm happy it unraveled this way because I don't mind speaking more about Mother's motherships, because in 2017 when these suckers dropped, before when you walked into Sephora, Pat McGrath Labs had a little kiosk stand with a bunch of gold sequins and plastic packaged eye kits with the cheaper plastic packaging but dazzling finishes, much like what you see now in the original 3 motherships. And it was cute, right? It was giving you runway, it was giving you high fashion, packaged in a little small bag. But when Pat released her first mothership palettes, it is true, the buzz surrounding these compacts was immense. To have a luxury eyeshadow palette in this size, black lacquer, brushed gold base, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in. The fact that we had 10 shadows ranging from mattes, metallics, dazzling, just ornate finishes in a luxury palette, because before we encounter luxury eyeshadows, what comes to mind first is Chanel, the little quads, small pans, delicate, nice, elegant, sophisticated. But when Pat came in with these shadows, huge pans of product in this large case, it was something. And I agree, ever since then, with the whole special shade thing, including shadows in palettes that could transform other shadows. Now, I'm not sure how accurate that is, because I am aware that indie brands have released special shades before, but they released them individually. They weren't packaged like they were in the black lacquer casing. So I do think presentation is important. I do think having just that specific design and vision is what brings it all together. I love the indie finishes and whatnot, but my argument was, and still was, when people were like, what's the big deal about Pat McGrath, and still are today, which I understand because the brand has shifted a little bit in terms of the quality. We'll get to that in a second. I do feel that the whole high fashion runway perspective is heavily present in these motherships, and something that the indie brands did not possess. And what made the difference for me as a consumer and me gravitating towards that more high fashion route, because it's more appealing to me. Not that it's right or wrong, makes me morally better than the person who prefers indie. Not at all. That's just my preference. But I do think the presentation, just the unrolling of a huge eyeshadow compact from the luxury beauty space with these dazzling textures, was something to behold, and indeed iconic. So I would like to go through the 3 palettes individually. I don't have B-roll of me applying the shadows because I do plan in filming 6 look tutorials with each, right? So that is coming. But I do have the final looks for each. And why don't we start with the first mothership, Subliminal. Another unique characteristic to the brand was how these motherships were housed in these beautifully illustrated boxes. My apologies for not knowing the artist. I will make sure to find out and post the artist name down below. But you know, Subliminal is just your classic go-to with the smokier shades. It leans overall cool. Out of all the 11 mothership palettes now in the brand, this is one of the cooler leaning palettes, and I still feel one of the most classic color edits in the brand. I of course had to go in with Blitz Blue all over the lid because listen, when you have a shade as rich and potent as Blitz Blue in the original baked formula. So I made a mistake in my Huetopian Dream video. I'll make sure to post a link up above and down below that I had said that those shades weren't baked. They are indeed baked because it is recognized by the fact that the pans are raised, but we haven't seen this more creamy baked formula in a mothership for quite some time. And you have all the textures here with the VR shades and the actual shades with the 3 mattes. You have the more taupey medium shade, the lighter taupey shade, the black matte, the skin show shade, and the 2 metallics here. The lilac shade with just this light silvery charcoal metallic, gorgeous. I made sure to apply as many shades as possible on my eyes to display the magic that is Subliminal and the fact that you can downplay the looks, create ultra classic moments that I feel reminiscent of Natasha Denona's Glam palette, which another point I wanted to make, I think Natasha Denona was also on the special effects train for quite some time, especially when those chroma crystal textures were released in her Star palette. Those were a lot of fun. I know not quite the same as Pat's actual shades, but I feel like Natasha was on a similar wavelength, perhaps not in the same high fashion runway vibe as Pat McGrath, but she was there. She foresaw. Going back to the actual shades here, incredible in that you can apply, I believe this is Astral White, intensifying that more electrifying blue effect from Blitz Blue, applying the lighter gold shade, Pale Gold 002. It has just this beautiful reflectivity that has a wet effect on the skin, and the cooler mattes I think create beautiful structure through the crease where you can lightly dust these because these pack a punch. These pack a punch. I like to use a much fluffier brush just to create a more soft focus edge on the hardier metallics here. And again, as I was going into glam, there's like a glam moment just from this charcoal shade where you could pair it with the more medium taupe, really smoke it out with extreme black, or just apply the VR actual shade on the center of your lid in a lightweight manner and creating that twinkle effect that, again, so decorative, but sophisticated at the same time and easy to achieve. I know when people encounter these textures for the first time, there is a bit of a learning curve, 100%. But once you got used to it, once you've accustomed yourself to the appropriate technique required to get the most out of these actual shades that won't look overly dry on the lids, that won't have fallout on the cheeks, right? It's just one tap. You just have to tap once, and that's enough adherence to place that texture on the lids. And I understand, I have a lot of real estate. I know you can still apply the actual shades successfully if you have the right primer. You can even forego the lid. I understand if you have deeper set eyes, the transfer is an issue. You can dab on the actual shades on the lower inner lash line, on the inner corner. There are plenty of regions on the eye where you could get that sparkle effect going. You could even apply those VR shades, actual shades on the cheeks, right? If you wanted the blue flip or pink flip to happen for highlight purposes, whatever route you wanted to go, you can go. Because again, these Motherships are artistry palettes. They are meant to be used on eyes, cheeks, and face, however you like. You could have a glossy lip and then tap on one of the astral toppers on the center of your lip to make it blue. You know what I mean? Why not go crazy? You could wet these shades to make that slick metallic wing liner using Blitz Blue or even Pale Gold Zero, whatever. This lilac shade, so beautiful on the center of the lid or even as an inner corner or more inner third moment. I like to use the lighter shades for inner corner skin show. You could use on the cheekbones as well as in the, you know what I mean. So we started with Subliminal, which I believe I purchased last because the next one, our beloved Mothership 2, Sublime. I believe this was the first palette to sell out because as you can see, it was a little more approachable, right? We have the green Blitz Emerald. I truly believe this was the brand's official Divine Rose palette. This is Rose deconstructed. It includes shades like Rose, hold on. Rose Dusk. Rose Dusk is in Divine Rose 1 Mothership 7. It's a repeat shade. This was the original home for Rose Dusk, copper tone, and the reason why I think people prefer this palette is, as you can see, the more neutral tone overall, but you could wear these suckers on the cheeks. I applied copper tone on my cheeks, and yes, because it is a pearlescent shade, it will have that sheen on the cheeks. If you have texture there, might not be the great way to go. Just buff that sucker, okay? It will look smoother, and you're left behind with a soft orange copper hue on the center of your face. You could apply Rose Dusk higher, closer to the hollows of your cheeks. The skin show shade is more of like a pink opalescent effect. And Blitz Emerald. Blitz Emerald is like the actual Emerald City from Wizard of Oz. It is outrageous. And the astral shades here, I made sure to apply the more opalescent, the astral ghost orchid shade on the center of my lid to bring out more of like that neon pink effect from Rose Dusk. I know I haven't been swatching, my apologies, but you will see more swatches when I get into the tutorials. But look at Blitz Emerald. Still to this day, it has such lovely texture and shine. I can't get over this. And because of the baked texture, you can blend the edges of it and just look how it blends out and fades out. It has a soft end, right? You can bring that through the crease, and also using the dark matte shade, just completing that gradient and adding more smoke there. You could also tap a little bit of extreme black on the outer corner, and the astral shades, especially VR Nectar. VR Nectar is, I believe, the peachy pink to gold flip. You could wear this on its own, on the lid. You could place it on the inner corner, whatever you wanted to do. But Sublime for me is just exquisite. It truly, for me, is the Rose palette from Pat McGrath. It was the first one. And I get how Divine Rose 1 went the total pink route, and you have the pink theme present in Mothership 2 for sure. A little more eclectic. There's a little more diversity here when it comes to the rose inspiration, but I feel more literal because of the inclusion of Blitz Emerald and the fact that it's so versatile in terms of where you can place the shade. On the B-roll you saw, I placed it on the lower inner corner because I think despite its deep color, the vibrancy and just the shine it emits just from the lower inner part of my eye is incredible, juxtaposed against the more copper, softer rose shades. And this one here, iconic. Okay, iconic. This metallic is beautifully buttery soft and smooth, but one of my most favorite go-to one and done moments from all of Pat's metallic shades. It has just a a desaturated, like bronzy look to it. And the finish, although it's not shiny like the actual shades, it still has beautiful shine, which I think adds character to the eye, where if you don't want to just exclusively rely on a matte for shadow, you could use Iconic, Copper Tone, or Rose Dusk, what have you. Sublime is exquisite. And there's so much you can do with it. Despite Blitz Emerald being in there, you don't even have to use that shade. You can stick to the more neutral ones. Rely on the mattes for smoking it out, because again, as I mentioned with Subliminal, the mattes pack a punch. You need a light hand, but that gives you space. You are in charge of the intensity, how smoky you want to go. And you can be intermediate smoke by using a softer brush, or you could go all the way advanced smoke and pack it on the lid, all right? Pack it on the outer lid, throw it through the crease, just get in there, and you will have that high fashion moment, 100%. But the dial is in your hands. You have that opportunity. Various dials are in your hands. And the sheer opportunity, the breadth of it, given by each mothership, again, worn on the eyes or on the cheeks, and an advantage Sublime does have over its counterparts from the trilogy, because Rose Dusk and Copper Tone, I think, more cheek friendly, 100%. The Skin Show shade has a lovely opalescent finish to the shade. It's more like that softer pink flip. It's more powdery in finish, where the Skin Show shades are usually to be in all the motherships, but you just softly dab it and it's fine. I have to find the right inspiration for Subliminal. Let me know down below, fam. I do equate Subliminal to Moonlit Seduction in terms of like moon crystal vibes, moon castle, very cosmic in that regard because of its overall cool nature. Sublime, you have your deconstructed rose. And now for the last one of the trilogy, and you guessed it, what I have in my eyes for the video. This was my first mothership purchase, and although not my favorite mothership, because you know which one that is, I still have to place it high on the hierarchy of mothership palettes that are considered to be my favorite, but it's still iconic, and that is no other than our beloved Mothership 3 Subversive. Just like how I explained, thank you to Dolce for explaining, just as I had presented in my Huetopian Dream video, when reading Dolce's comment about how Huetopian Dream gave her Sailor Moon vibes. As of late, I've been listening to a lot of future funk on YouTube. I didn't realize that genre was a thing, but many of these future funk mix channels, or rather specifically videos, showcase a lot of 90s anime, electro pop aesthetic visuals, and every time I encounter those, I immediately think about Subversive. This is like your punk rock 90s curation, and to me, this screams Pat McGrath. This screams just the groundbreaking nature of her brand when it first hit the shelves, introduced in her palettes, right? Because yes, her smaller kits were creating buzz, they're creating talk, but until these suckers came, it was like the octaves were high, the decibels were high. Subversive is just, my goodness, especially with Night Creature and Gigabyte. Those shades, every time I think of them, I say them, I wear them, I immediately think Pat McGrath. Those shades for me embody Pat's vision, what she strongly delivered in these palettes for her brand. It was clear that she wanted to establish herself as a runway high fashion artist, the one responsible for these eclectic combinations on the eyes, her approach to makeup, and to do it all, to just go there. Forget being soft. Forget the just soft pearlescent hues. No, we want to see that sparkle from over there. We want to see the model's eyelid sparkle from the back. And I think that's why she decided to include these textures. And my goodness, you can't, I'm running out of words. It's in your face and incredible. I don't know what else to say. Night Creature, for me, one of my most favorite Pat McGrath shades of all time. I can't get enough with it. I have it here on the eyes, as well as, I believe it's Blitz Amethyst. I combine it with Blitz Amethyst because the flip for Blitz Amethyst is actually the Night Creature color, okay? And Gigabyte, forget it. Gigabyte is your antique gold, but like dirtied up because there's a little black in there. It's like a blackened antique gold. Out of all three, Subversive 100% is my favorite. I know not as versatile as Sublime, as I described Rose, Dusk, and Copper Tone being great for the cheeks. Sure, you might not be able to get away with applying Night Creature on the cheeks. It really all depends though. It depends on your skin tone. If you were deeper complected, 100% you could place that on your cheeks. It's gonna be a look, for sure, but it'll have more of a neon highlighted effect. And of course, applying Gigabyte as a highlight, something to consider. The Skin Show shade in Subversive has more of a gold leaning hue, more of a champagne gold leaning hue. And the Astral shades, VR Pink and Astral Ghost Orchid, on the final look, I applied the Astral Ghost Orchid shade on top of Night Creature to bring up more of like that neon pink flip. And my goodness, VR Pink is just, this is more pink leaning than the shade found in Sublime, right? This is more of like a peachy to gold. This is more of like a cooler pink to gold. All of them are great. All of them are great. But Subversive to me is so electrifying. It has, again, like that grunginess, but it's also dazzling at the same time because of the colors included. And again, I mean, this was the golden age of Pat. Now, someone else had argued that Bronze Seduction is iconic. I agree. Again, I presented Star Wars collab just because that release was something. But Bronze Seduction perhaps was one of Pat's best releases because of the inclusion of different mattes. Because right before was Decadence, and that was the all metallic formula in that palette. And before, as you probably have noticed when seeing all of the first three Motherships, they each had extreme black. And that is a critique for many. Why do I want the same black shade in all three palettes? Well, that's just how she went, okay? And the brown shades were potent. The deep shade from Subversive, you better be careful. You better be careful with that shade. It turns up real fast when you're not looking, and before you know it, you're smoked out, right? And people felt like there wasn't a lot of room for nuance in terms of adjusting the color. I had explained, however, it really all depends on the brush you use. I think you can achieve a softer smoke with these shades with the right brush, but when Bronze Seduction came out, it housed like a lighter brown shade and a medium brown shade, and then we had, I believe it was Extreme Aubergine, that beautiful blackened eggplant smoky color that was not extreme black, and people were like, oh my god. And of course the VR shade was like that teal to gold flip. One of my bosses called me and I just totally got sidetracked. What was I talking about? I think it's appropriate for me to wrap this up. Let me just say this. I think Pat McGrath Labs, Pat McGrath, Dom, Pat, Mother, bridge the gap between high fashion and consumer. The high fashion element definitely exists in the fashion house makeup brands, right? Like the Chanel's and the Givenchy's and whatnot. But there was something different about this. Pat McGrath Labs had an edge. It had an edge, and it was louder. It has something to say. It was more so, yes, I'm luxury, but I'm loud luxury. Teetering on gaudy a little bit, but not too much in terms of the color choices, the textures. it was robust in that way. And I think anyone who has one of the original Mothership palettes understands. And we understand now more where we saw the brand evolve. And I think this was largely due to two reasons. Because the cardboard packaging was introduced in the 6-pan Motherships, right? Because I think the brand recognized that not everyone's going to drop $125 on 10 shadows, 4 out of those 10 being glitzy, ornate shades that they just didn't want to get down with. Totally understand. So Pat had the abbreviated all consonants Mothership brand within the brand. And the next round was the Mothership Mega Palette, Celestial Nirvana, that released for holiday 2020. When I saw that palette for the first time, I could not believe it. It was not the brand that I was used to, right? But I do understand that's a part of the consumer space that just want the metallics and the matte finishes, right? They're not going to get into the crazy reflective whatever shades, the actual shades, and that's fine. But then the pandemic happened, and I believe all brands are undergoing supply chain issues, raw material shortages, and whatnot. And I do believe that Pat had grand, ambitious plans for makeup that unfortunately she just couldn't do, and you can see the effect. You can feel the effect, I think, mostly recognized from her most recent Mothership release, Mothership 11 Sunlit Seduction, which was okay. It was okay. We didn't see the normal baked textures. They were more like drier metallic shades that were shiny but didn't have the same effect as the VR or Astral shades. The Blitz baked texture was last seen, I think, in a Mothership 8. Divine Rose 2, the one that's like what's found in Subliminal, for instance. Or let me see, which one do I have here? Yes, Subliminal, right? This baked texture that's not as shiny as these, but it has like that creamy type of feel to it. I don't know when we'll ever see that again. And in holiday 2019, we had the Astral Quads, which they were exquisite, right? If you were on the other side of the scope, you didn't want the metallics and the mattes. You just wanted all astral shades in one compact, and that's what we got for holiday 2019. I think one of the best releases for that year for a holiday, and we never saw those again. And I'm not sure if we'll have the same Motherships like we did when these first dropped in 2017. I don't know. I don't know if supply chain issues will improve, if raw material, whatever this will improve, if Pat has to raise the price in order to go forward with grand plans of Blitz bake shades or what have. I don't know. What I do know, instead of dwelling on the fact that the brand is not the same, because it's not, I just go back into my original Motherships. I relish in the memories where I first bought these suckers and just could not believe the price, but also the impact they had on me, my makeup collection, my perception of makeup. I mean, everything shifted when I grabbed these palettes, when I used these palettes. My goodness, I'll never forget how I was criticized for loving Pat so much, and these aren't new textures. Like, that's not the point. The point is how these glitzy, dazzling textures were packaged. The perspective from which they came from, I think, is one of the more significant points about the brand. And what I think, if people know, they understand the difference between runway and not runway. And I think that perspective heavily influenced the brand and what it's about, because all the products that came afterwards was about creating the model type skin, just like the glass skin finish and everything else. But the shadows were just something to behold, and I think still something to behold. And why Brian Miller is correct, why these 3 palettes are truly, still are, iconic till this day. So let me know, fam, what do you think about the iconic status of Pat McGrath's first trilogy of Motherships, Subliminal, Sublime, and Subversive? I also consider, yes, Bronze Seduction to be iconic, but I would like to know your opinion down below. I will see you down there in the comments, and until then, that is a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video helped, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up or maybe consider subscribing to my channel. And until then, I will see you on here again with another review tutorial, Pat McGrath Labs Mothership 6 tutorial extravaganza, or another iconic video. Maybe next time we'll do face palettes. Take care, and I will see you again soon.